Hi everyone, I'm Mareecor Tolentino and you can just call me Miss Mareecor and welcome to this review session. Today we're going to go over some key points from one of the most exciting and meaningful subjects that we had or that we studied, which is the children and adolescents literature. So, what is children and adolescents literature all about? This subject focuses on stories written specifically for young readers, from toddlers to teens. It is not just about fun or colorful books, it is also about how literature supports a child's development, whether it is in emotionally, socially, and intellectually. Through this subject, we also learn how different types of literature, like picture books, folk tales, fantasy, and young adult novels, can help shape values, build identity, and reflect culture. It is a powerful tool in helping children understand the world and themselves. So, without further ado, let's now begin our review. Okay, to start our review session, I have prepared 10 items for us or for you to answer. So let us start with number 1. What best describes children literature during the classical period, which is 500 BC to 400 AD? Letter A. Focus on fairy tales and magic. Letter B. Rooted in oral storytelling with heroic adventures. Letter C. Mostly printed picture books. Letter D. Centered on school instruction and mass education. Again, I am going to repeat. What best describes children's literature during the classical period 500 BC to 400 AD? Letter A. Focus on fairy tales and magic. Letter B. Rooted in oral storytelling with heroic adventures. Letter C. Mostly printed picture books. And letter D. Centered on school instruction and mass education. Alright, the correct answer is letter B, rooted in oral storytelling with heroic adventures. So, during the classical period, children's literature did not exist as printed materials yet. Instead, it was rooted in oral storytelling. Stories were passed down by word of mouth. This included heroic and mythical tales like the Adventure of Hercules, Aesop's fables, the Iliad, and the Odyssey. These stories often taught moral lessons and were meant to reflect ideals of truth, beauty, and virtue. So the choice is letter A. It is incorrect because fairy tales emerged much later during the 18th century with authors like Charles Perrault and the brothers Grimm. And the letter C is also incorrect because picture books didn't exist in this period. Printing wasn't invented yet. And letter D is also incorrect because organized education and instructional books for children didn't appear until the Renaissance period. So for our second question, what does the goose symbolizes in Aesop's The Goose That Laid the Golden Eggs? Letter A, greed. Letter B, death. Letter C, generosity and good luck. Letter D, laziness. Again, I will repeat the question. What does the goose symbolizes in Aesop's The Goose That Laid the Golden Eggs? Letter A, greed. Letter B, death. Letter C, generosity and good luck. And letter D, laziness. Alright, for our correct answer in number 2 is letter C, which is generosity and good luck. So in fable, the goose that lays golden egg is a symbol of generosity, good fortune, and continuous blessing. However, the owner's greed causes him to kill the goose, thinking he can get all all the gold at once, and in doing so, he loses everything. The goose itself symbolizes a steady reward and good luck. And the story warns against impatience and greed. So the letter A, it is incorrect because while greed is the central moral of the story, it is not what the goose symbolizes. And letter B, death is the result but not symbolic element. And letter D, laziness isn't depicted in this fable. For our third question, during which historical period did children's literature primarily consist of oral storytelling, featuring mythical and heroic characters like Hercules, and what was the primary focus of this era's stories? Letter A, medieval period. Letter B, Renaissance period. Letter C, classical period. Letter D, Edwardian era. Again, I will repeat the question. During which historical period did children's literature primarily consist of oral storytelling, featuring mythical and heroic characters like Hercules? And what was the primary focus of this era's stories? Letter A, medieval period. Letter B, Renaissance period. Letter C, classical period. And letter D, Edwardian era. And the correct answer is letter C, classical period. The classical period, 500 BC to 400 AD, marks the earliest forms of what we now consider children's literature. During this time, stories were not written down but passed orally from generation to generation. These tales often included mythical heroes such as Hercules and epic poems like the Iliad and the Odyssey. The purpose of these stories was to communicate moral lessons, cultural values, and heroic ideals. Also, Aesop's fables, another staple of the era, use animals to depict human traits and dilemmas, delivering concise moral lessons such as humility, patience, and honesty. This period focused on truth and beauty, aiming to shape character and instill wisdom through stories. So the choices letter A is incorrect because the medieval period was more religious and centered on Catholic teachings rather than mythology. And the letter B is also incorrect because the Renaissance focused on intellectual awakening and educational printing. And lastly, letter D, the Edwardian era, is also incorrect because it was much later and emphasized psychological development and imagination in children's stories. Alright, so for our fourth question, Aesop's fables such as the lion and the mouse, the hare and the tortoise are examples of early children's literature. What makes these fables timeless in both their form and message? Letter A, they use horror to scare children into obedience. Letter B, they use fantasy to distract from real-world problems. Letter C, they use symbolic animals characters to teach simple but powerful life lessons. And letter D, they were written as long religious poems with complex vocabulary. Again, I will repeat the question. Aesop's fables such as the lion and the mouse and the hare and the tortoise are examples of early children's literature. What makes these fables timeless in both their form and message? Letter A, they use horror to scare children into obedience. And letter B, they use fantasy to distract from real world problems. Letter C, they use symbolic animal characters to teach simple but powerful life lessons. And letter D, they were written as long religious poems with complex vocabulary. So the correct answer is letter C. Symbolic animal characters and powerful life lessons. Aesop's fables are still widely read today because they communicate timelessly through every accessible storytelling. By giving human traits to animals like a proud hare or a grateful lion, Aesop's was able to reflect everyday moral choices in a way children could easily remember and this and could in a way that children could easily remember and to relate to. These short narratives are easy to remember and are rich in meaning. Each fable concludes with a moral with a moral teaching, valuable lessons about life, such as kindness, perseverance, or cleverness. Also, the universal nature of these themes ensures that even thousands of years later, they are still relevant. So the choices letter A is incorrect because these stories were not meant to frighten them, but to instruct gently. And letter B is also incorrect because fantasy was used to make lessons more understandable, not to escape reality. And letter D it is also incorrect because Aesop's fable are brief and written in clear, direct language for accessibility. We're already in the half of our review, so for our fifth question, how did the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg during the Renaissance period impact the development of children's literature? Letter A, it allowed children to write their own stories at a young age. Letter B, it discouraged the use of storytelling and focused on oral tradition only. Letter C, it enabled mass production of educational and religious books, expanding access to reading. And letter D, it replaced all fairy tales with textbooks. Again, I will repeat the question. How did the invention of printing press by Johannes Gutenberg during the Renaissance period impact the development of children's literature? Letter A, it allowed the children to write their own stories at a young age. Letter B, it discouraged the use of storytelling and focused on oral tradition only. And letter C, it enabled mass production of educational and religious books, expanding access to reading. And lastly, letter D, it replaced all fairy tales with textbooks. The correct answer for number 5 is letter C. Mass production expanded access to reading. Johannes Gutenberg's invention of the printing press in the 15th century revolutionized the availability of books. For the first time, texts could be mass produced, lowering costs and making reading materials more accessible to the public, including children. This technological breakthrough allowed for the wide distribution of educational and moral texts, such as the book named The Governor and the Schoolmaster. Before this, books had to be painstakingly copied by hand copied by hand. The rise in literacy and education, particularly among the middle class, meant that children's literature began to expand, not just in religious content, but also in the development of early textbooks and chapbooks for young readers. So the choice is letter A. It is incorrect because writing was not widespread among children yet. Reading came first. And for the letter B, it is also incorrect because printing reduced the dependence on oral tradition, not increase it. And lastly, letter D is also incorrect because fairy tales continued to be published. They were not replaced by textbooks. And for number 6, which author is known as the father of children's literature? For publishing the first books specifically made for children's enjoyment and moral education, such as Little Pretty Pocket Book. Letter A, Hans Christian Andersen. Letter B, John Newbery. Letter C, Charles Perrault. And letter D, Richard Johnson. Again, I will repeat the question. Which author is known as the father of children's literature? For publishing the first books specifically made for children's enjoyment and moral education, such as The Little Pretty Pocket Book. Letter A, Hans Christian Andersen. Letter B, John Newbery. Letter C, Charles Perrault. And letter D, Richard Johnson. The correct answer is letter B, John Newbery. John Newbery is an English publisher in the 18th century and is often considered the father of children's literature because he was among the first to publish books that were made specifically for children's entertainment and education. His Little Pretty Pocket Book was designed to appeal to young readers while also reinforcing proper behavior and good morals. He believed that children could learn better if they were engaged and entertained. This marked as a significant change from earlier religiously didactic texts, showing a recognition of children's developmental needs and interests. So the letter A, it is incorrect because Hans Christian Andersen was a legendary fairy tale writer but came later. For letter C, Charles Perrault is incorrect because adapted fairy tales for publication, but because again, Charles Perrault is incorrect because he just adapted fairy tales for publication but didn't focus on moral education. And for letter D, Richard Johnson is also incorrect because he was involved in the children's books but did not have the same cultural impact as Newbery. Number 7. In the fairy tale Sleeping Beauty, what does the long sleep of the princess symbolically represent beyond the surface level story? Letter A, laziness and wasted youth. Letter B, temporary protection and the promise of destiny. Letter C, a punishment for curiosity. And letter D, the failure of royal families. Again, I will repeat the question in number 7. In the fairy tale Sleeping Beauty, what does the long sleep of the princess symbolically represent beyond the surface level story? Letter A, laziness and wasted youth. Letter B, temporary protection and the promise of destiny. Letter C, a punishment for curiosity. Letter D, the failure of royal families. Okay, the correct answer is letter B, temporary protection and the promise of destiny. The Sleeping Beauty is not a random curse. It carries deep symbolic meaning. It represents a pause or protection from the dangers of the world, especially from the evil that cursed her. Her awakening through love is not only romantic, but a symbol of hope, renewal, and fulfillment of destiny. The sleep creates a moment of suspension in time where she is preserved until a safe moment to return and fulfill her role. This story also reflects themes of patience and trust in fate. Okay, so the choices are the choices. Letter A, it is not laziness because the sleep was involuntary and magical. So letter A is incorrect. And letter C, it is also incorrect because true curiosity plays a role, spinning which were the sleeping beauty are about the spinning wheel. The sleep itself is a result of the curse. And letter D, it is also incorrect because royal failure is not the primary theme in this tale. For number 8, what major development in the Edwardian era changed the way children were portrayed in literature? Letter A, writers focus only on fairy tale villains. Letter B, children were shown as complex individuals with their own feelings and perspectives. Letter C, books became exclusively educational. And letter D, literature for children declined in popularity. Again, I will repeat the question. What major development in the Edwardian era changed the way children were portrayed in literature? Letter A, writers focused only on fairy tale villains. Letter B, children were shown as complex individuals with their own feelings and perspectives. Letter C, book became exclusively educational. And lastly, letter D, literature for children declined in popularity. The correct answer is letter B. Children were shown as complex individuals. The Edwardian era or early 1900s marked a shift in how childhood was understood. Children were no longer seen as a miniature adults or blank slates for moral lessons. Instead, literature began to reflect the inner emotional lives imaginations, and dreams of children. Works like The Secret Garden, Peter Pan, and The Little Princess captured loneliness, wonder, and resilience, and also imagination. These stories didn't just teach lessons, they also gave the children the space to see themselves represented honestly in literature. So the option letter A is incorrect because villains were part of the stories but not the focus of this shift or this era. And for letter C, it is also incorrect because books became more emotionally rich, not solely educational. And for letter D, it is also incorrect because children's literature flourished in this era. So we're now on our ninth item, which means we're already on the second to the last question. For number 9. In Hansel and Gretel, what does the gingerbread house symbolize in terms of temptation and survival? Letter A, a safe place for lost children. Letter B, the kindness of strangers. Letter C, deception disguised as comfort and pleasure. And letter D, a magical reward for cleverness. Again, I will repeat the question. In Hansel and Gretel, what does the gingerbread house symbolize in terms of temptation and survival? Letter A, a safe place for lost children. Letter B, the kindness of strangers. Letter C, deception disguised as comfort and pleasure. And lastly, letter D, a magical reward for cleverness. Okay, so the correct answer is letter C. Description, deception disguised as comfort and pleasure. Why is that the correct answer? Because the gingerbread house in Hansel and Gretel is a symbol of temptation and false security. On the outside, it looks delicious and safe, attracting the hungry children. However, it is actually a trap created by the witch to lure or to capture and harm them. This symbolizes the idea that not everything sweet is safe, a valuable lesson about being cautious of things that seem too good to be true. It also warns of strangers who may appear kind but have dangerous intentions. For the option letter A, it is not safe at all. It is a trap. So for letter A, it's incorrect, and for letter B, it's also incorrect because the witch represents danger, not kindness. And lastly, letter D, it's also incorrect because the house is not a reward, it's a lure. For our last question, number 10, why is Charlotte's Web by E.B. White considered a milestone in modern children's literature? Letter A, it was the first story to use animals as characters. Letter B, it focused on action and adventure. Letter C, it explored emotional and philosophical themes such as death, loyalty, and friendship. And letter D, it was purely educational in tone and content. Again, I will repeat the question. Why is Charlotte's Web by E.B. White considered a milestone in modern children's literature? Letter A, it was the first story to use animals as characters. Letter B, it focused on intense action and adventure. Letter C, it explored emotional and philosophical themes such as death, loyalty, and friendship. And lastly, letter D, it was purely educational in tone and content. Okay, so for the correct answer for number 10 is letter C. Emotional and philosophical literacy, it explored emotional and philosophical themes such as death, loyalty, and friendship. So, Charlotte's Web is celebrated because it introduced emotionally rich and realistic storytelling into children's literature. It deals with themes like friendship, sacrifice, fear of death, and the meaning of life. Through the friendship between a pig who is Wilbur and a spider who is Charlotte, Charlotte's act of saving Wilbur shows children what loyalty, love, and kindness look like even between unlikely friends. This emotional depth helps children's book move beyond simple morals into complex emotional and ethical discussions. For the option letter A, it is incorrect because talking animals existed long before this. Option letter B, it focuses on intense action adventure, is also incorrect because the story is thoughtful, not action packed. And letter D, it was purely educational in tone and content. It is incorrect too because it teaches life lessons through story, not formal instruction. So that's it for the children and adolescents literature review. I hope you've learned something for our review and good luck.